The battlefield was silent for only a moment. Smoke rolled across the broken ground, hiding the shapes of soldiers and machines. Alien Marines, tall and armored, stood in formation, their weapons raised, their eyes searching. They had trained for many battles, fought many wars, and seen many species fall. But what they were about to witness was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The human stood in the middle of the chaos. His armor was scorched, and one side of his body was covered in blood. A blast had taken his arm, ripped it clean away in an instant. The alien soldiers froze when they saw it happen. To them, losing a limb meant the end of a fight. No soldier of their kind could stand after that. It was always the same: pain, shock, collapse, and then silence. But this human, this Deathworlder, did not fall. At first, the alien Marines thought it was adrenaline. They whispered to each other through their comms, voices tense and uncertain. The human should have been rolling on the ground, screaming in agony, but instead, he stood tall, breathing heavily, his eyes locked on the enemy ahead. His body swayed slightly, but his stance was steady. The blood ran down his side, soaking into the dirt, but he didn't seem to notice. One of the aliens whispered, "He is still alive. Still fighting." Another replied, voice filled with disbelief, "That is not possible. He should be gone." The human bent down slowly, picked up his weapon with his remaining hand, and lifted it as though nothing had happened. The aliens watching could not believe their eyes. The pain should have been too much. The shock should have stopped his heart. Yet the Deathworlder carried on. The battlefield lit up with fire again. Explosions cracked in the distance. The air shook with the roar of weapons. But the eyes of the alien Marines stayed on him. They watched as he moved forward, step by step, toward the enemy line. Each step left a trail of blood, yet each step was stronger than the last. The commander of the alien squad muttered, almost to himself, "He refuses to fall." The younger soldiers in the unit could not look away. Some felt fear rise in their throats. Others felt something different, something harder to name. Respect. Awe. Whatever it was, it tightened their chest and made their hands tremble. The human fired his weapon. The blast shook the air, cutting down one of the enemy. His aim did not falter, though his body was broken. He fought with the same fury as before, as if the wound had only awakened something hidden inside him. The aliens whispered again. Does he not feel pain? Is he blind to his own death? Or, is this what humans truly are? The battle raged, but the focus of every alien was fixed on the Deathworlder. Each moment seemed impossible. Each second stretched into eternity. They could not look away, even when the noise of war surrounded them. The human pressed forward, blood spraying from his side, dirt clinging to his armor. His face was pale, yet his eyes burned with fire. The enemy tried to stop him, focusing their fire on his lone figure, but he did not stop. He did not stumble. He kept fighting, as though losing his arm meant nothing. The aliens had seen bravery before. They had seen warriors charge into certain death. But this was different. This was not just bravery. This was something else, something deeper, something primal. It was the will of a species born on a world of death, where survival meant pushing past limits, past reason, past the body's own warning to stop. The alien commander spoke again, his voice low but sharp. Remember this. What you are watching is not madness. It is humanity. This is why they are called Deathworlders. The younger aliens swallowed hard. They had heard stories. Stories of humans climbing mountains without oxygen. Stories of humans walking for days without food. Stories of humans surviving where no other species could. But stories were only words. This was real. This was in front of their eyes. The human was slowing now, but still moving. His weapon barked fire, his arm shook, but he would not fall. He was alone, yet he fought as though he carried the weight of 1,000 soldiers behind him. The aliens felt the tension grow inside their chests. They did not want to see him collapse. They wanted No, they needed to see how far he would go. The suspense gnawed at them, held them in place. One of the soldiers whispered, almost a prayer. He cannot last. Can he? But the answer did not come. The human stumbled forward, raised his weapon again, and fired. He moved like a storm that refused to die, like fire burning even after the fuel was gone. The aliens could not believe it. Every second felt like the last, and yet another came, and still he fought. The battlefield was no longer a war. It was a stage. And the human was the only actor who mattered. The alien commander knew his soldiers were no longer thinking of the fight. They were locked on this one man, this broken soldier who refused to stop. He let them watch. He let them learn. Because what they were seeing was a lesson the galaxy had forgotten. The human was bleeding out. His steps were heavy now, each one slower than the last. But his eyes never left the enemy. He did not turn back. He did not cry out. He pushed forward with every ounce of will left in him. And then, it happened. The human dropped to one knee. The aliens held their breath. They thought it was over. They thought the story had reached its end. But it had not. With his last strength, the human slammed his weapon to the ground, using it to push himself back to his feet. He stood again, tall and unbroken, though his body was failing. The aliens stared in silence, every one of them frozen in disbelief. What they saw next would haunt them forever. The human screamed, a sound of fury, of pain, of defiance, and charged forward. Not crawling. Not limping. Charging. His broken body moved with the rage of a warrior who refused to fall. The alien Marines would never forget that moment. The sound of his cry. The sight of his broken form still moving forward. The impossible truth of a Deathworlder's will. And as the human rushed into the fire, the aliens finally understood. Humanity was not just another species. Humanity was something else entirely. Something unstoppable. Something terrifying. Something that could not be explained in numbers or logic. And in that instant, every alien watching knew, the galaxy would never be the same again. Smoke still hung over the battlefield, but the aliens could no longer hear the war around them the same way. Their focus stayed locked on the human, the Deathworlder who refused to stop even after losing an arm. For the alien Marines, the fight had changed. It was no longer about weapons or victory. It was about trying to understand what they were witnessing. The human steps were uneven now, heavy, dragging, yet his weapon kept firing. His blood marked every step, but still he pushed forward. The aliens felt their own hearts racing, and they were not the ones wounded. They had fought in campaigns that lasted years, against enemies who showed no mercy, but nothing had ever shaken them like this. One of the younger soldiers whispered to his commander, his voice trembling. "He should be dead, but he keeps moving." The commander didn't answer at once. He was staring at the human, his mind caught between disbelief and fear. At last, he muttered, "You are not watching a soldier. You are watching a species that refuses to surrender." The human stumbled, dropped to one knee again, and for a moment it seemed like his strength was gone. The aliens almost leaned forward, waiting for the fall. But then, as though pulled up by some invisible force, the Deathworlder rose once more. His breath came in harsh gasps, but his eyes burned like fire. The enemy turned their weapons on him, panicked by his persistence. Lasers cut through the air, artillery shook the ground, yet he moved through it all. Shots struck around him, some tearing through his armor, but he did not stop. To the aliens watching, it was like seeing a storm refusing to fade, no matter how much the sky tried to crush it. The human fired again, dropping another enemy soldier with a clean shot. He fired again, and another fell. Each trigger pull seemed impossible, but each one landed true. His arm trembled, but his will did not. One alien Marine whispered, "Does he even know he is dying?" Another answered, his voice dark, "Maybe he knows. Maybe he just doesn't care." The suspense tore at them. How far could one human go? How much pain could one body take before it broke? They had been taught that humans were strong, yes, but strong was not enough to explain this. This was something beyond strength. This was defiance made flesh. The alien commander finally spoke, his voice tight. This is why their worlds are called death worlds. This is what they learn from the moment they are born. To keep moving. To survive when survival is impossible. To fight when the fight should already be lost. The younger soldiers shivered. They could see it now, not as rumor or story, but as truth carved in blood and steel in front of them. Humans were not just survivors. They were predators of fate itself, tearing apart the destiny written for them and writing a new one with their own hands. The human's pace slowed again. His weapon dipped for a heartbeat, but then he raised it and fired once more. He did not let himself fall. Every time his body tried to give out, his will dragged it forward again. The aliens realized something else then. This was not only about killing the enemy. This was about refusing to let them win. The human's fight was a message, one carved into the battlefield with every step. It said, "You can break my body, but you cannot break me." The commander leaned closer, his voice like stone. Remember this day. Remember what you see. Because one human is showing you more than 1,000 battles ever could. The suspense grew heavier. Every step the human took, every breath he dragged into his lungs, every shot he fired was like the drumbeat of something larger, something terrifying. The aliens were caught between horror and admiration, unable to look away. The Deathworlder bled, yet he fought. He stumbled, yet he stood. He should have been gone, but he was not. And as the battle roared on, the alien Marines realized the truth that chilled their blood. This human was not just fighting to survive. He was fighting to prove that nothing, not pain, not loss, not even death itself, could make a Deathworlder surrender. They would never forget it. The battlefield was no longer just noise and fire. For the alien Marines, it became a stage of fear. They had fought many wars, they had faced death countless times, but none of that had prepared them for what they were seeing now. The human kept moving, wounded beyond reason, yet refusing to stop. His blood was the price, but his will was the weapon. The alien soldiers found themselves whispering more than firing. Their weapons trembled in their hands as they watched the Deathworlder push through fire that should have ended him long ago. His face was pale, his body broken, but his eyes were alive, filled with fury and something stronger than any shield. "Why does he keep going?" one alien muttered, unable to tear his gaze away. Another answered, though his voice cracked, "Because he doesn't know how to stop." The commander's silence was heavy, but his eyes never left the human. He wanted his soldiers to see, to learn. Because this was not just a battle. It was a lesson written in pain and defiance. The enemy, realizing they could not bring the human down easily, focused their fire on him. Shots burned across the ground, explosions shook the dirt beneath his boots, and still he moved forward. Each step was agony, but each step was defiance. The younger alien Marines felt their chests tighten. They had been trained to fight without fear, to see the enemy as nothing but targets. But this was different. This was not just an enemy. This was something else, something that filled their hearts with unease. One whispered, "If this is what one human can do alone, what happens when there are many?" The silence that followed was louder than the war itself. The human stumbled again. His knees buckled, his weapon nearly slipped from his hand. The aliens held their breath, waiting for the collapse. But instead, he forced himself back upright, dragging strength from a place no alien could understand. He fired again, his shot true, his enemy falling. The aliens' fear deepened. It was not fear of death. It was fear of realization. They had always thought of humans as reckless, stubborn, dangerous. But this was beyond danger. This was a glimpse of something the galaxy had not prepared them for. The human scream echoed over the battlefield, raw and fierce. It was not a scream of pain alone. It was a scream of refusal, of will, of life clawing back from the edge of death itself. The sound dug into the aliens' bones, and they knew they would never forget it. One soldier whispered, "I thought I understood war. I was wrong." The commander finally spoke, his voice low but sharp. "This is why they frighten us. Not because of their weapons. Not because of their numbers. But because they do not fall when they should. They fight when logic says the fight is over." The human pressed on, and the alien's fear grew into something else. Respect. The kind that burned hotter than admiration, the kind that cut deeper than honor. They were watching not just a soldier, but the spirit of an entire species written into one broken body. The younger Marines lowered their weapons slightly, not at the enemy, but in awe of the figure still standing. They realized that no simulation, no training, no book could have prepared them for this. The commander's gaze hardened as he spoke again. "Do not ever forget what you have seen today. The galaxy is not ready for humanity. Perhaps it never will be." The suspense hung over them like a storm. Every step the human took forward was another heartbeat of tension. Every breath he pulled into his lungs was another reminder that he should not be alive, yet he was. The aliens watched, and with each passing moment, their fear became certainty. This was not the last time they would see such defiance. This was only the beginning. The war raged on, fire and smoke stretching across the horizon, but for the alien Marines, their attention remained fixed on the single figure pressing forward. The human was no longer just a soldier in their eyes. He was something else, something impossible. His body was failing, his blood painting the ground with every step, and yet he moved with a purpose that silenced every doubt. The enemy line began to falter. At first, they had focused their fire on the wounded Deathworlder, thinking it would be easy to bring him down. But every blast that struck near him only seemed to make his rage grow stronger. He charged again, firing with his one remaining arm, his movements sharp and precise despite the weakness that should have ended him. The enemies hesitated. They were soldiers too, trained in fear and discipline, but even they could not explain what they were seeing. One alien Marine whispered to his squad, "They are breaking. The enemy is breaking, because of him." Another added, his voice trembling, "Not because of weapons, not because of numbers. Because of a man who should already be dead." The commander kept his gaze steady, his jaw tight. He had seen battles won by strategy, by numbers, by firepower. But this was a battle turning because of willpower alone. The commander muttered softly, more to himself than his squad, "This is not just a fight. This is the spirit of his kind forcing the war itself to bend." The human pushed further, stumbling yet unstoppable. Each shot he fired struck true, not wasting a single breath, not wasting a single moment. His enemies began to step back, their formations breaking, their lines collapsing. Fear spread among them, and the alien Marines could see it, the enemy's discipline shattering under the weight of something they could not comprehend. One soldier in the squad gripped his weapon tighter and said, "They're afraid of him. They're afraid of one man." The human roared again, a sound that cut through explosions and fire. It was not a roar of victory, it was survival, it was fury, it was a promise that he would not stop until the last enemy fell. That sound carried across the battlefield, echoing in the ears of both friend and foe alike. The enemy began to retreat. Their lines collapsed entirely now, soldiers stumbling backward as they tried to escape the storm that one broken human had become. And with each step they took back, the alien Marines realized the truth. The tide of the battlefield had shifted. Not because of strategy, not because of technology, but because one Deathworlder had refused to fall. The younger alien Marines could hardly breathe. They had been told humans were dangerous, yes, but dangerous was too small a word. What they were watching now was beyond danger. It was beyond courage. It was defiance that bent the flow of war itself. One soldier whispered, almost reverently, "How can anyone fight against a species like this?" The commander's voice cut through the haze, calm but cold. "You don't fight against them. You survive them. If you are lucky." The suspense thickened as the battlefield fell quieter. The enemy, once so confident, now scattered like prey before a predator. And still the human advanced, his steps heavy, his body near collapse, but his spirit brighter than ever. The aliens watching understood then that they had not just seen a soldier carry on after losing a limb. They had seen the power of humanity's will, the thing that turned defeat into victory, despair into fire, and fear into respect. And as the dust of the battle settled, the alien Marines knew this moment would follow them forever. They also knew one terrifying truth: if one human could do this alone, then what would an army of them unleash? The battlefield grew quiet, though smoke still rose from the shattered earth. The human had finally stopped moving. He stood motionless, his weapon hanging at his side, blood dripping steadily onto the ground. His chest rose and fell in ragged breaths, but he did not fall. The enemy had retreated, broken and scattered, unwilling to face him any longer. The alien Marines remained hidden behind their cover, their eyes locked on the Deathworlder. None of them spoke at first. None of them dared. What words could explain what they had just seen? At last, one of the younger soldiers broke the silence. His voice was soft, almost like a child's. "How is he alive? He should have been dead long ago." Another shook his head, his voice filled with disbelief. "Alive? That is not the right word. That is something else. Something we do not have a word for." The commander remained still, his gaze locked on the human. He had fought in more wars than he could count. He had seen bravery, cowardice, strength, and weakness. But this was not bravery. This was not even strength. It was something far greater, something terrifying. He finally spoke, his voice heavy. "You have just seen the truth of Deathworlders. They do not surrender to pain. They do not surrender to wounds. They do not surrender to death itself." The squad shifted uneasily. Some avoided looking at the human, as if even meeting his gaze from afar would be too much. Others stared openly, unable to pull their eyes away. One whispered, "What if they all are like this? What if every human carries this inside them?" The commander's silence was answer enough. The human swayed slightly where he stood. For a moment, it looked as if he might fall at last. The aliens tensed, holding their breath. But then he straightened his back, lifted his weapon again, and began walking slowly through the battlefield. He was not charging anymore. He was not firing. He was simply moving, step by step, through the smoke and ruins, as if daring the universe itself to stop him. The younger Marines felt a chill crawl down their spines. They had been trained never to fear an enemy. Yet fear was exactly what they felt. Not the kind of fear that made you run, but the kind that rooted you in place, the kind that whispered in your bones that you were standing in front of something greater than you could ever be. One soldier whispered to another, "Maybe he doesn't even care about living. Maybe humans fight because they need to, not because they want to." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. The commander finally turned to his squad. His face was grim, his voice like steel. "Remember this moment. Remember what you have seen. The galaxy has forgotten what humanity is. But we have been reminded. And the galaxy will learn again." The soldiers looked back at the human, still moving slowly, one-armed, bleeding, but unbroken. They would remember. They would never forget. And deep inside, each alien knew something that made their hearts pound harder than the sound of battle. If one wounded human could change the course of a war, then no enemy, no empire, and no army could ever truly be safe from them. The suspense lingered in the silence. The fight was over, but the fear had only just begun. The battlefield lay behind them now, nothing but ash and wreckage. Smoke drifted into the dark sky, carrying the smell of burnt metal and blood. The alien Marines moved cautiously through the ruins, but their eyes never strayed far from the human. He had survived the battle, though he should not have. His body was torn, his arm gone, his armor broken, but still he walked. He did not speak. He did not call for help. He did not even seem to notice the pain that must have been consuming him. He moved with slow, steady steps, dragging himself toward a half-collapsed wall. There, he sat down heavily, placing his weapon across his lap. For the first time since the fight began, he let his head fall back and closed his eyes. The alien Marines expected him to collapse, to finally give in to the wounds that no creature should have survived. But he did not. His chest rose and fell in rhythm, calm and controlled, as though he were simply resting after a long day's work. One of the younger soldiers whispered, How can he look so calm? He lost an arm, he bled across the battlefield, and now he sits as if nothing happened." Another shook his head slowly. "He should be screaming. He should be begging for help. But he just sits there. Like this is normal." The commander studied the human in silence. The expression on the Deathworlder's face was not one of victory, nor of pain. It was something else entirely. A quiet acceptance, perhaps. Or maybe something even more unsettling. Familiarity. "He has lived this before," the commander muttered at last. "This kind of pain, this kind of loss, it is nothing new to him. This is not his first scar. And it will not be his last." The younger soldiers shifted uneasily. They had never thought of pain as anything but an end. For them, pain meant retreat, injury meant helplessness. But the human treated it as routine, as if his broken body were just another burden to carry. The Deathworlder finally opened his eyes. They were tired, bloodshot, and heavy, yet still filled with that same fire. He looked around the battlefield, not searching for aid, not even for threats, but as if measuring what was left. He leaned forward, tore a strip from his ruined armor with his remaining hand, and tied it tightly around the stump of his arm. The motion was rough but efficient, the work of someone who had no time for fear. The aliens watched in silence. One of them whispered, almost to himself, "He patches his wound as if he were fixing a machine." Another added, "No fear. No hesitation. Just survival." The human leaned back again, his breathing steady. He lifted his head to the stars for a moment, and for the first time, the aliens saw something close to peace in his expression. Not joy, not relief, just peace. The younger soldiers could not understand it. They exchanged looks, uneasy and shaken. One asked quietly, "Why does he not cry out? Why does he not ask for help?" The commander answered without hesitation. "Because Deathworlders do not wait to be saved. They save themselves." The words settled into the silence like a heavy stone. The suspense grew in the minds of the alien Marines. They began to realize that humanity's greatest strength was not only its rage in battle, but its calm afterward. The ability to treat agony as ordinary, to face death and carry on as if it were only another step in the journey. The human sat there, one arm gone, covered in scars, yet somehow appearing almost untouched by the suffering. He was not beaten. He was not broken. He was only resting, ready to rise again when the next fight came. The aliens could not look away. For the first time, they began to wonder if humanity's true weapon was not their machines, not their armies, but this terrifying ability to endure anything. And in that moment, as the Deathworlder sat beneath the smoke-filled sky, the alien soldiers felt something deeper than fear. They felt respect. A respect that no training could erase, no propaganda could bury, and no commander could deny. What they had seen today was not just survival. It was a reminder that humanity, in its quietest moments, was more dangerous than any enemy they had ever faced. The alien squad did not speak as they made their way back to camp. Their boots crunched softly over the broken earth, but the sound felt hollow in the heavy silence that clung to them. Each soldier carried the same image in his mind, the human standing in the smoke, one arm gone, body torn, yet refusing to fall. No matter how hard they tried, they could not push it away. When they reached the command outpost, the atmosphere was no lighter. Holographic displays flickered in the dim light, showing maps of the battlefield, casualty numbers, and enemy movements. But for the squad, none of that mattered. All they could think of was the Deathworlder. The commander stepped forward, requesting immediate audience with the senior officers. The guards allowed them inside without delay, perhaps sensing the urgency in their eyes. Inside, the command chamber was filled with high-ranking alien leaders, their uniforms marked with the symbols of rank. They looked up, expecting the usual report of losses and progress. Instead, the commander bowed his head slightly and said, "We witnessed something today that cannot be measured in numbers." The room quieted. One officer frowned. "What do you mean?" The commander hesitated for only a moment, then answered, "A human soldier fought after losing his arm. Not only fought, he carried the battle. He turned the enemy to retreat. Alone." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. One scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "Exaggeration. I have heard these stories before. Humans are stubborn, yes, but losing a limb means certain death." The younger soldiers in the squad stepped forward, their voices trembling with conviction. "No, Commander. It is true. We all saw it. He bled across the ground, he stumbled, he should have fallen 100 times. But he did not. He fought until the enemy broke." The officer frowned deeper. "How long did he last?" One soldier whispered, "Long enough that we began to doubt if death applied to him at all." A cold silence spread across the chamber. The officers shifted uneasily. 4 seasoned leaders, it was not the words that shook them but the tone in which they were spoken. Fear, awe, respect all tangled together. The commander took a step closer, his voice sharper now. This was no myth. No soldier's tale. This was reality. One human shifted the battlefield. One wounded man bent the will of an enemy force. If one can do this, what do you think an army of them will accomplish? The chamber remained silent. No one dared to answer. Finally, one officer leaned forward, his voice low. "If what you say is true, then humans are not merely soldiers. They are a force of nature." The commander nodded grimly. "And nature does not negotiate. Nature does not yield. Nature consumes." The younger Marines behind him exchanged glances. They were still shaken, still unable to clear the sound of the human scream from their minds. It had been more than pain. It had been defiance, something their species could not match. One of them finally spoke up, almost to himself. "If the galaxy truly underestimates them, then the galaxy will not survive them." The officers said nothing more. The report ended not with strategy, not with numbers, but with silence. The kind of silence that carried fear heavier than any weapon. The commander turned to leave with his squad. As they walked out, one of the senior officers muttered under his breath, "If this spreads, the balance of power will never be the same." The words hung in the air long after the soldiers left the chamber. And in the quiet of that moment, every leader present understood the truth. The galaxy was no longer at war with just another species. It was at war with humanity. Creatures who did not fall, creatures who turned pain into power, creatures who refused to die. The war ended that day, at least on that field. The enemy had fled into the distance, their broken formations scattered by a single man's will. But for the aliens who had witnessed it, the battle was not truly over. The image of the human, drenched in blood, torn apart yet still standing, would not leave them. It carved itself into their minds, a memory they knew would last forever. Weeks later, when the smoke had cleared and the bodies were buried, the alien Marines still spoke of him in hushed tones. Around campfires, in quiet corners of the barracks, they whispered the story. They whispered about the Deathworlder, who fought after losing an arm, who screamed his defiance into the face of death itself, who bent the course of a battle by sheer will alone. At first, they spoke with disbelief. They repeated the tale to test if their memories had betrayed them. But each time, the story remained the same. Each detail, each scream, each impossible step forward, it all lined up. And slowly, the disbelief faded into something heavier. Respect. Fear. Reverence. The commander, a soldier who had fought for decades, gave no speeches. He didn't need to. His silence carried enough weight. When his soldiers looked into his eyes, they understood that what they had seen was not just unusual, it was a truth about humanity that the galaxy had ignored for too long. Reports spread slowly through military channels. Some dismissed them as exaggeration. Others called them myths, the usual tales soldiers tell to pass the time. But those who had been there, those who had stood in the smoke and watched the human fight, those soldiers did not laugh. They did not exaggerate. They spoke with voices flat and heavy, and the weight in their words made others hesitate. One officer far from the battlefield read the report and muttered, "If this is true, then no calculation, no strategy, no fleet will ever be enough." And he was right. For the aliens who had seen it, life itself seemed different afterward. Pain no longer felt the same. Fear no longer carried the same meaning. Because they knew that out there, among the stars, there was a species that did not play by the same rules. A species that bled like all others but refused to fall. A species that carried within them something no weapon could destroy. They had been taught that humanity was reckless, unpredictable, dangerous. But they now knew the truth was far more unsettling. Humanity was relentless. Humanity was unyielding. Humanity was the storm that refused to die. The younger soldiers in the squad carried the story with them like a scar. Some dreamed of it at night, hearing the echo of the humans scream in their sleep. Others tried to bury it, but it surfaced again in every quiet moment, every silence between orders. And the commander, though he never admitted it aloud, found himself haunted as well. He had seen victories, defeats, and everything between. But never before had he seen the will of a single being turn the flow of a war. He knew now that humanity was not to be measured in numbers, not to be weighed by statistics. They were something else entirely. In the years that followed, the story spread beyond soldiers and officers. It became a whisper in the halls of power, a tale that reached ears it was never meant to. Some dismissed it. Others took it as a warning. But all who heard it felt the same chill, the same quiet unease. Because if one broken man could do that, what would happen when humanity came together? The alien Marines never forgot. They would tell the story again and again, each time ending the same way. With silence, with wide eyes, with the knowledge that what they had seen was not a legend, but truth. And in the quiet corners of the galaxy, where leaders plotted wars and empires rose and fell, a shadow began to spread. The shadow of a single Deathworlder who refused to fall. It was not just a story of survival. It was the birth of a legacy. A legacy that whispered through the stars that humanity was not just another species. Humanity was something more. Something terrifying. Something eternal. The aliens had seen it with their own eyes, and they would never forget. For in that battle, on that day, they had learned the one truth the galaxy would have to face. Humanity does not fall.